right, hello, welcome to Inside the Data on Inside the Birds. I'm Geoff Mosher, and of course, it's Inside the Data, so you know we have our data and analytics expert, Sam Finkel, and as promised, another Inside the Data mailbag. And our last one was fun. We went over tush-push statistics, success rate, because it was very relevant at the time, with it not dying, the death that everybody thought. And then we answered a few viewer, listener, reader questions, and now we've got more answers and more questions. And a reminder to everybody, we'd like to continue doing these mailbags throughout the off season and then into the season. So please continue to send your questions and make sure that you identify them as questions for Sam, because we have other people sending mailbag questions for either myself and Adam or Andrew DeCecco. So please make them also analytically based questions. Don't ask Sam who the best left tackle in the AFC is based on his own eyes, because we're here for analytics and data. So have you generally enjoyed so far, Sam, the caliber of question that you've been getting?
Absolutely. They've been incredible questions, and they've made me do a lot of research, and it's been a lot of fun looking into some of these things.
That's great. I always like a good question where you got to you know what? I got to go check the websites, got to check the book of stats, go back in time, the historical precedent. Those are the best.
Yeah, I agree. And it's actually making me kind of shift some of my analysis, because I've been using a lot more of NFL Pro as a tool rather than PFF. And I think it's just really exciting, because the level of statistics and analytics we're going to have this season is going to be even more than last season.
That's right.
It's going to be exciting.
NFL Pro is a great tool to have. Absolutely. I use it all the time. It's also good for film watch and everything, but really good data and next-gen stats and things like that. Let's get right into the questions. And we answered a question in the first mailbag, I believe from the same person, Anthony K, but there's sort of a follow-up that goes along. In the last mailbag, Sam, you were asked, how does the performances by SaquonBarkley and JalenCarter, how does that sort of directly lead to wins, right, for the Eagles? What stats best show that? And then you explain rushing yards over average. You explain some of the defensive stats that show that JalenCarter does. In a follow-up or an expanded version, the question is, if you had to pick one underrated stat that explains why the Eagles have been so successful last year, what would it be and why? So this is more about something that is maybe less obvious or underrated rationale for the Eagles' success.
Yeah, so I think it's a defensive stat, to be quite honest with you. I know that the Eagles' defense is held in a very high regard, but what really shows it is if you look at their expected points added per pass, it's second in the league behind the Broncos at minus 0.17. So anytime that a team is passing on the Eagles, on average, the team is losing 0.17 point opportunities. So it's a pretty impressive statistic.
That is.
Coupled with time to throw. They're third behind, believe it or not, the Giants and the Titans at 2.69 seconds. So if you look at that, I think it really shows that they're really good at complementary football. Mm-hmm. Both the pass rush and the secondary act really well together and are able to limit offenses pretty well.
So the time to throw stat. So did that mean that defenses gave the Giants and the Titans were giving the quarterback less time to throw than mostly every other team?
Surprisingly.
Is that possibly these were not two very good defensive teams, although you could argue that the personnel for both teams, they have some pretty good defensive players, but because they were so bad, maybe they were easily picked apart. Like quarterbacks didn't have to hold on to the ball.
It's very possible, because time to throw is a good statistic if you're a good team, because you're showing that you get good pressure, but it's a double-edged sword because of exactly what you just said. If you're a bad team, I mean, they're going to pick you apart quick.
Okay, Sam, you also had a note on JalenHurts that explains some of the reasons for the Eagles' success that might not be obvious.
Yeah. I think JalenHurts is a really big part of the Eagles. And for all the hype he does get, I also feel like he's very underrated in a specific category, and that's kind of his passing game. So if you look at his completion percentage over expected, and again, that's the difference between a quarterback's actual completion percentage and expected completion percentage control. It's essentially a measurement of difficulty, right? So it's what the average quarterback would make as a pass, or what would be completed.
Right.
So with that stat in mind, Jalen Hurts has a completion percentage over expected at plus 6.7%, which was the most in the NFL during the regular and postseason.
Okay, that's really interesting to me. And I would think that that is a stat heavily weighted by how good of a downfield thrower that he is, especially outside the numbers. Those are low percentage passes that he doesn't take a lot of shots doing, but when he does, he typically strikes well with them. It's not uncommon for Jalen Hurts to maybe only throw 4 or 5 balls, past 30 yards in a game, but complete 3 or 4 of them, which is a high percentage, right?
Absolutely.
It's not high percentage for the rest of the NFL, but it is for him.
Right. And I think that's where this like underrated value comes in, right? He can consistently make these really low chance throws, low probability throws, and he does them consistently. And that's where that plus 6.7% number comes from, just like you said.
Let me ask you this from an analytics standpoint, because one of I don't know what you call it, knocks or criticisms or critiques of Jalen's game is his reluctance to throw inside the numbers, right? So if there's an open receiver and he does not throw it to that receiver, that doesn't count against completion percentage stats or above expectation. That is simply on throws to receivers that are either completed or not completed to that receiver, correct?
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Just making sure.
Yeah,
is there something that sort of are other analytics that kind of go into where the ball should go and percentages of that?
Not readily available. That's certainly a project we could do this upcoming season. It might be fun, but it would probably involve individual charting and understanding of the schematics. It'd be kind of a fun thing to do, a nice exercise.
Yeah, it probably would look like the baseball, like the hot and cold zone, like where you're completing passes, where you're not. But we've kind of seen this now from Jalen for over the years. It almost becomes like a story if all of a sudden he starts doing it at a really good rate, and we can compare that to the past few years.
Sure.
But
I think PFF does have heat maps, but I think it would be very interesting to see like where it was supposed to, like where he could have gone on the play on his read. That would be a really fun. It would be a pretty in-depth study, but it'd be a fun thing to do. But I will say that they do have heat maps, so we could probably get at least a heat map for sure.
All right, something to look forward to down the road during the season. Another good question came from Matt R., who wants to ask you who has the best opportunity to be a diamond in the rough in this year's rookie class. And he, says include the undrafted rookies if you want. And obviously, you're being asked this. It's a tough question unless there's some kind of data. You're being asked to answer this from a data-driven analytics standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the obvious answer of which rookies will contribute are probably the ones in the higher round. So we're going to take those options away.
Yeah, not exactly diamonds in the rough if Jihad Campbell is really good.
But I appreciate Matt giving me a little bit of a leash here and allowing me to put the UDFAs in. And there are some really exciting guys to talk about. I think that APR is exciting. Obviously, Miles Hinton, Holland Pierce, and Cam Williams are exciting. But the guy I really want to focus on is Ty Robinson.
Okay.
So he is a very interesting player because we talked a lot about him and how he's just a pressure machine. He had 104 pressures in the last 3 seasons in college, which was the most among drafted interior defensive linemen.
Definitely an upfield guy. I mean, this guy can generate some push.
Absolutely. And I know that we also had some questions about Ty Robinson also. So it kind of fits really nicely here. And one of the questions that was asked was who his pro comp would be. And I think we should put a link into Greg Cosell's video where that kind of addressed that same exact topic. And I think Greg is obviously someone who's more equipped to do those kind of comps. I love making comps, but I think obviously Greg is such a great resource and expert that his comparisons are worth more than, just my viewpoints on it.
Sure. But is there, so Greg mentioned, if I can't find the video, I'll just say it. Greg mentioned Zach Allen from the Broncos? And is there something that stands out from a height, weight, speed, analytic, anything that makes that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, just watching his film, they move very similarly. They definitely are have a similar frame. And I think what's interesting is I think both of them can be played along the defensive line and have some positional versatility. I think people might get sick of us saying that between all these draft picks, because I mean, that is really something the Eagles value, is this positional versatility. And I think it's really interesting. And I know Greg was saying that he could really be moved around, and probably if he's going to contribute early, he will be moved around. And so I find that really interesting, and that's definitely what I'd say on that.
I think he's probably the most multi-positional guy on the Eagles D line. Whereas, and that's not a knock on anybody. I'm just saying, like, Jordan Davis is a 0 who can play the 3, but he hasn't shown you yet that he's going to give you a ton of pass rush. He can do it. It's not like he doesn't know how to do it, but as far as being effective, he's mostly effective first and second down at the 0. JalenCarter's a 3 technique. 3 Moro Jomo, 3 technique, 4-eye in the 5-man front. It's a little bit of an alignment difference, but a responsibility is the same. Those guys, I guess, when he was here, Milton Williams occasionally would play the edge and give you a little bit of a big edge. But talking about Ty Robinson, it sounds like this is a guy that could play 3, 5, or even 7 technique. Maybe not someone you're going to line up out on the edge in a wide 9 or anything like that.
Right.
However, with stunting and twisting, you could probably get him isolated against tackles.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives Fangio another tool and another opportunity to bring pressure from a different body type at a different spot. And like you said, with twists and stunts, there's a lot of potential.
What was it about APR? And by the way, I'm still not used to, like, when someone says APR, I'm thinking like a stat and not a name, but Antoine Powell-Ryland, that stood out to you that potentially makes him a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, he's a super interesting player, just because his statistics are much closer to the top 15 guys taken as opposed to the second to last guy. He has been consistently he's been consistently a presence felt on the defensive line. He makes the most when he's on the field. He has among the higher sack to snap rates. He had 3.46 among edges. Like I said, despite being the second to last selected.
Got it. All right. So we got a couple of questions, one from Matt R, or maybe a couple from Matt R, actually, about, some of the position battles and who might take a big jump. So from an analytics standpoint, you did find a couple of guys that you thought maybe their stat improvement or statistic, how they showed up on the stat sheet and the analytics might show you something about 2025. So let's go through them a little bit. Keely Ringo is obviously competing to replace Darius Slay. He's going to compete with Adoree Jackson and some others. But what did you find out from last year that might give fans some hope?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that I'd like to mention is he had an improved catch rate over expected. Again, that's just what the catch rate, his actual, minus what an average corner would allow.
Mm-hmm.
And so also his coverage expected points added, which is just how much points he would be giving up or taking away from a team, improved from 23 to 24 with increased snaps. So it's just, and again, he has another year under Fangio, and he's able to develop in the system, and he's going to be asked to do a lot more this year. So I think he's a big name to keep an eye on, and I think he's equipped to be successful.
Yep. Obviously, when the sample size gets bigger and a percentage gets better, that's a good thing, because a lot of times, like when you're talking about running backs and yards per carry average, the more you get, the more it's bound to sort of come back to earth a little bit, or come back to the average or the mean, as we would say, regress to the mean. So it's good that Keely Ringo got more snaps last year than the year before, but is the numbers that you're looking at, the important data improved for him.
Yeah, and again, these are a little bit cherry picked because those were the stats that I thought were the most interesting, and those are, I think, very valuable stats. But not all his stats did get better. I want to be.
Is there one in particular that did not, that jumps out to you?
His catch rate was a lot higher, and that is going to happen when you have a higher volume. Sometimes, like it that one, I don't really necessarily credit it too much or fault him too much on that particular regard. But I do think it's interesting to note that I did pick stats that I thought helped this argument, and not everything did get better. I think that that's an important thing to understand as well.
Okay, no problem. We love balance though. So as we go forward, if you want to find things that you to keep it, like, well, he's good at this, but not that, that's fine too. Tyler Steen, he's going to be competing at right guard, obviously with Kenyon Green and a bunch of draft picks who, you know how the Eagles are. They got a couple of tackles in the draft. They may try to throw them at right guard just to see what they got there. But what did you find out about Tyler Steen's data last year?
Yeah, I mean, he's still no sacks allowed, which is a pretty big one. I know at guard it's easier. It's easy for us to say that sitting down and not necessarily going against some of the best interior defensive linemen in the world. But it's a very impressive statistic. I also will say he allowed 18 pressures in 221 pass blocking snaps, which is 8.14% pressure rate. And then in just last year, it was 6.7%. So
okay, so he's improved the pressure rate.
Yeah.
And what is a good pressure rate for a guard? It's probably a little lower than that, though,
it's
right?
lower than that. Yeah. Like around 5% is like kind of what you're looking for. So it's still a little bit higher than you would have liked, especially with considering the talent that he had around him.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think that the growth, that is an important thing to recognize and understand, and it'll help project how he might do next year, especially because he'll have another year under Stoutland. He'll be able to learn and develop.
Awesome. We have a great question next. Are you ready to roll up your sleeves on this? This one is about as analytically and data-driven as it gets. Are you ready for Morgan P's question?
I'm ready.
All right. So Sam, she asked, I assume it's a she, it could be a he. How do you go about comparing analytics of players from vastly different schemes to get an accurate representation of their overall ability and performance, which may indicate their ability to adapt? Now, this is a fantastic question, because if you think about all of the free agents the Eagles have been signing over the last 2 years, and last year really being the year one of the true Fangio scheme, they've hit on some. Obviously, Zach Bourne, who could have seen that coming, right? But then there have been guys who just did not adapt. Terrell Edmonds, they signed 2 years ago to play safety from a totally different scheme with the Steelers, and it did not work out at all. Devin White, for example. So what's your answer to that?
Well, this is a good question because of exactly what you said and the fact that it is analytically driven, but it's a fun question because it's philosophical, right? It more than me actually giving concrete examples, I'm able to talk about philosophy here. And I think that's a big part of what I don't necessarily get to do in these segments. So it's fun kind of, broaching that subject a little bit. And so in that regard, I'll just tell you what I feel like I try to emphasize in every time we do one of these analyses. Statistics serve as a baseline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eye test is still a crucial component in projection and prediction. Basically, statistics only take you so far. We have uniform statistics on everybody, and actually, Morgan's next question, which is sort of interesting too, we'll also get to that, attack the subject. But what's interesting is that you have to take what we have with the statistics and you have to kind of filter it, right? You have to understand that just because player A did these conditions under team 1, team 2 will utilize player A completely differently. And so you have a baseline, and you have to almost strip away these conditions and say, like, what were the actual contributions of this player outside of their supporting cast? And so it's kind of a fun question, and it's a hard question to answer concretely. It's more theoretical than what we normally talk about, which is a fun thing to do, but it's also hard to contextualize because there's just so many other variables that are hard to remove from the process. I mean, statistics it's a team sport. You can't remove team impact.
Wow.
So
very well said. The only thing I would add is that, as you mentioned, the eye test is crucial, but you can find certain, I would think, individual data about a player. Let's take a cornerback, right?
Sure.
And let's take a cornerback's missed tackle rate. All right. We know that in a Vic Fangio defense, he likes to play a too high shell, likes to have his safeties deep. So that puts added run responsibility on your corners, your nickel corner and linebacker. I'm sorry, nickel, not nickel corner, because Vic Fangio doesn't call that a corner. So if you have a player who's never played in a Fangio scheme, but the data and the analytics show he's a very physical player and a good tackler and his missed tackle rate is low, that probably could help you project how he might fare in a Fangio scheme, at least as that role of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are statistics, like you said, that are better indicators than other based on what you're trying to do with the player.
Mm-hmm.
However, you say that, and then you look at them, and their missed tackle rate's probably going to be higher just because of that extra responsibility. So it's not really a 1-for-1 type thing, but it's you can project like the traits that are needed and through statistics and say that this guy has a makeup and he has the stats that we want and he will be successful because of it. But I think that's an excellent point, and I appreciate you bringing it up.
Awesome. And then the counter response is excellent too. It just goes to show that there's no one thing here that is tell all. It's a tool, and like most good what's the word, contractors, I guess, they use multiple tools and they don't just rely on one, and sometimes they need one to get themselves out of another. I got to get a screwdriver because I got something caught from a different tool. So they all work together,
and they have to work together.
Mm-hmm.
They have to work together because and NFL teams are doing this, right? That this is a big tension that exists in the world of sports, but particularly football. There's always a debate between is it my gut or is it my computer? And I think the best teams do both at the end of the day.
100%. Morgan had a follow-up just specifically on wide receiver. What are the best advanced stats for evaluating a wide receiver and why?
Yeah, I absolutely love this question too. And I think it also kind of, like I said, I previewed it a little bit, but it gets into this issue of different schemes and archetypes and usages of receivers. I mean, even a slot and an outside receiver, it's different. So when I attack this question, I tried to attack it based on uniform stats. There are some stats I like a little bit better depending on if you're an outside or a slot receiver or how you're going to be used in the scheme. But I tried to keep it, airtight so it could be all receivers. But again, you'll be looking at different things depending on where they line up predominantly. Can they be lined up at both? Are they going to be, an underneath guy? Are they going to be a clear out deep guy? Like what is their actual role? It does change.
100%. So give me some of the ones that you do like.
Yeah. So again, I really, these NFL next gen stats are there. I love them. They're just so much fun. They have so many great formulas and great algorithms that are just fun to use. And one of them, you're going to keep hearing me say, you've heard me say all off season. I mean, I'm going to keep saying it this year, is the rate over expected. And this is the catch rate over the expected. Again, that's just their normal catch rate minus what an average, receiver would actually catch. And so what this does is it's a good measurement of difficult catches. Can this player make difficult catches?
Right.
For example, AJ Brown had a catch rate over expected of plus 8.5%, which was sixth in the NFL. But you want to know something crazy? And you're not going to find this crazy, but some people might. Guess who had a higher one?
Quez Watkins. No, I'm just kidding. Who?
Devontae Smith.
Devontae Smith. How about that?
Plus 12.3%, which was second in the NFL.
I guess it really doesn't surprise me because I feel like in this Eagles offense, Devontae probably makes a few more jump ball contested catches, whereas AJ has really become that guy who takes defenses over the top and he has the late hands. I don't know. I don't know how that gets judged when he just sticks his hands out at the last minute to catch a pass, but I do feel like the degree of difficulty on receptions tends to tilt toward Devontae Smith.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's why I said I don't think you'd be too surprised by it.
No.
But I mean, if you really look at the highlight reel of catches, if you just looked at the highlight reel of catches, Devontae Smith does it all. I think he is one of the most underappreciated players on the Eagles roster. And I still think he's very appreciated. The degree of difficulty, and I think this stat shows it, it's incredible. And what he does and what he brings to the table. He's a wide receiver one on almost every other team. Not that he isn't for the Eagles. Like obviously this distinction between wide receiver one and wide receiver two is I've never loved it, but I'm just trying to, use the colloquial language of it. But he is the number one option on almost every other team. Which you'll see.
Oh yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
You'll see that in some of the other stats I'll bring up here.
Yeah, I know you have yards per route run listed, and I think people have asked me why that's important and what it really shows.
Yeah.
Which is obviously your receiving yards divided by the number of routes that you ran.
So this is a stat you have to qualify, right? Because it funnels into two different categories. Category one, if you're a volume guy, it's a really good stat for showing like how it's overinflated for volume guys, but it's also an efficiency statistic, right? For guys that don't get a huge volume, if you have a high yards per route run, it shows you're a very efficient receiver. For volume guys, you better be high. Like that's the threshold. If you are not high and you're a volume guy, I guess it's an efficiency statistic either way, but it's even more. You should be looked at with higher scrutiny if you are a volume guy and you have a low yards per route run. If you're not getting a huge volume and you're sharing a lot of targets and you have a high yards per route run, that's where it showcases like elite receivers, and that's why I really love this statistic.
And what does it say about AJ Brown and Devontae Smith?
Yeah, so AJ Brown is 2.9, which is third in the NFL, and Devontae Smith is only 0.6 lower, but 17th in the NFL.
Well, it just shows you how many receivers really fit into that category.
Sure.
Every team seems to have two really good receivers these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost a must.
True. Now let's talk about EPA per target, which would be expected points added per target.
Correct. And again, it's just a value indicator on what their targets lead to actual points, how often they do. It's a little bit of a complicated statistic, but if you really look at it from, this is a number that we're giving to show how valuable a receiver is and how they contribute to points. It's a little bit easier to understand. And so for that, I like this statistic. And AJ Brown is at plus 0.50, which is 11th in the NFL. And again, all these statistics are regular plus postseason. I like to put both together just because I think it tells the complete story. And then Devonta Smith is plus 0.63, which is third in the NFL.
Okay, so real quick on expected points, does this mean sort of touchdowns per target, or even if you catch a pass that puts you at the other team's 8-yard line, and at very least you should get a field goal, which is like a built-in expectation? Does that how do they go from expected points from each target?
It is the latter. So it's whether you're put in a position to score. Like, does it increase the likelihood of points to be scored? And there is a whole algorithm and formula that goes into that unfortunately we're not necessarily privy to, but it is that sort of calculation and that calculus.
Very interesting. I mean, because then now all of a sudden you're getting into, well, how good's your kicker? But you're really not. It's not about your kicker. It's about
the average,
the average of that kick in the league, and that's where the numbers. That Zach Galifianakis thing where all the numbers are going around. He's like,
oh, you got to post that now with this. I feel like
probably. All right, you have a couple more. What are some other good wide receiver metrics?
Yeah, so I have like one really big one that I want to say. It's the average separation that a receiver generates, but I think you got to pair it, right? I don't think it's a good statistic on its own, but if you pair it with contested catch or tight window rates, you feel pretty good about it. It tells more of a complete story.
Yeah, because then you kind of level the playing field for somebody who is an elite separator versus somebody who may not be an elite separator, but can still give you 8 catches for 88 yards because he's very good at getting the ball in contested catches or tight windows. That's fair. Like, you don't want to be discriminant here. You're trying to get all types of wide receivers involved.
Yeah. And if we were just talking about like an X receiver, for instance, it would be probably a little bit, I mean, you still want this, but it'd be different than if we were talking about a Z or a slot guy. It does change the analysis a little bit. And that's why I try to focus on things that we could kind of take away. Everyone could take away for just receivers if you wanted to analyze receivers.
Yeah. And to really try, this is how you are able to find some data where you can evaluate Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, who play the position completely differently, who separate differently, who, you know what I'm saying? Like, but you need something to like be able to say, well, they both do this well, even though they play the game completely differently.
Absolutely. And again, it's the same position but
Mhm.
completely different ways of attacking, and both of them work. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I think that it's really interesting because AJ Brown has a separation at 2.0, which is the worst in the NFL
Hmm.
among qualified receivers. But he was 41.2%, which was 19th in tight window catch rate. And then that over expected was plus 10.5%, which is 12th best. So as we qualify it, it gets better, right? So if you just looked at that separation stat, you'd be like, man, this guy stinks. But
Right.
he's catching like very well, and then it's over expected. So
It's perfect, man. I'm like, how many times do we see AJ Brown catch a pass with nobody around him? Very infrequently, right? Compared to the number of times we see him fighting off a catch or make, like I used that late hands thing to where he just got the ball in his hands because he stuck him out late, even though there was coverage. I mean, he's not Tyreek Hill, so you're not going to see him 20 or 30 yards past a defensive back.
yeah, and I know PFF just came out and they had him announced as the #1 receiver in the NFL. Which is a really cool thing to see. At least one of their, people came out with that. And
Yeah.
I think if you look at the separation stat, you're like, where does that come from? And that's why, again, you pair it with these other statistics to contextualize what he does. And what's the best part? This is the most exciting part for me is what we see on film is matched by the statistics. Like that, there's
100%.
no better feeling than that.
That is really cool. What about Devontae Smith with the separation and contested catch window rate?
Yeah, so he's at 3.0, which is 26th amongst qualifying receivers, and he's
Mhm.
also at 41.2% catch rate, which again is 19th, but his over expectation is only plus 6.9%. And I say only, but it's 17th. Like that's pretty impressive as well.
Right. Right. Really interesting stuff. And I know that there are some stats for receivers, how they perform versus man and how they perform versus zone, but I think that those aren't always I don't know if you agree if those are not necessarily the best metrics to
I
use.
So I wrote two notes on these. Number
Mhm.
one, it's not a great stat. It's a fun stat in certain contexts, but you need a very specific question that you're trying to answer. And I
Mhm.
like them for those kind of questions. But again, utilization matters, where you're lined up, like what team you're playing. So I put them down because those are advanced stats that are very useful. But
Right.
I agree with you. 100% agree. And it's the same with yards after catch, which is personally my favorite statistic when I'm doing fantasy football. Like that is by far
Sure.
my favorite statistic. Like and that's fun. But when you're evaluating real receivers, like there are value in guys that don't have yards after catch that are possession guys, and
Yes.
they like it's a good stat if you're looking at a certain type of archetype of receiver. And that's
Right.
why I put that one down too. But
Yeah, and not every great receiver gets to play in a Kyle Shanahan offense. So I
sure.
mean, that's one way to get your yak up. You just go right in there, and you're like, oh, it's like bam, all of a sudden, your yak goes great up. So
Absolutely.
awesome stuff, Sam. Really, really appreciate that. We will continue to do mailbags again. Email us at insidethebirds@gmail.com. Make sure that you identify Sam as the person you're asking the question to. Please keep them data and analytically oriented, and we will do this again. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Data. For Sam Finkel, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thank you all for watching.